Hello, I'm Sarah from SRTT and I help busy people make self-care a priority. You're listening to Conversations with Sarah, and today I'm joined by Liz Fleming from the Be Well space to talk about healthy eating as a self-care practice. Hello, Liz.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks
Thank you
for
so
having me
much.
on.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for joining me. I'm really interested in hearing what we're going to speak about today. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about who you are, what the Be Well space is.
Yeah, sure. So shall I start with who I am? This is always an interesting question, isn't it? How we describe ourselves to start with. I'm a mum to have two girls. And before I became a mum, I became a dietitian. So that's my background in terms of nutrition. So qualified as a dietitian in 2005, I think, which seems like a long time ago now. So dietitian professionally, a mum and a wife outside of a profession. And the Be Well space, I think I created, I don't know, maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, and it's had a very evolutionary journey. Started from an ethos of nurturing and nourishing very holistically, and then it goes through phases of being very nutrition focused and then a bit more holistic. But I think that's the good thing about the Be Well space. It's got the potential to be evolutionary, but the ethos of it is that nurturing and nourishing space that you can go to learn, and also teaches you how to create your own space of wellness, whether that be in your life, your environment, your mind, or your body.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on your page and I've been following you for a little while now, and I think one of the words I would use is inclusive. It's that, there's other spaces that I've been on about nutrition that sometimes feel restrictive, whereas what I've noticed, or what I feel like on your page, is it is very inclusive, and it is about how you use food to nourish yourself as opposed to restricting foods to achieve a goal. Would that be what you're aiming for?
Yes, I'm glad that's coming across, because that is the aim of it. I think you touched upon something there that a lot of people will identify with, that food can often feel quite restrictive. We have this association, don't we, about if we want to be healthier, the focus is all on, I need to cut this out and not have this, and that I feel very uncomfortable with. So I've always gone from a place of, we really, to be at our happiest, would be eating anything and everything. Like everything is okay. The key for me is having the knowledge around those foods and the nutrients that are in them. How nourishing is this food? And then you can make the decision of how much and how often is going to be healthy and have a feel good kind of association, versus maybe not enough of or too much of at the two extremes. So that's always been the goal of putting a really positive focus on nutrition as something to focus on the positives. So how can we eat, and what can we eat, and how much of those things can we eat in a way that feels good to us, whether that be mentally, emotionally, or physically. And it's all about finding the balance. So people will often say about healthy eating, but with treats. And so that says to me, I mean, it's all about language, isn't it, and how we each interpret what that means. We'll all have a different interpretation of that, but it suggests to me that people are looking for a mixture of what will physically do us good, whilst at the same time finding a way to eat the foods that mentally do us good, in a way, those kind of foods that we think, or have a bit of chocolate and that makes me feel amazing, or have a glass of wine and I feel really good. We would probably classify them as unhealthy foods or naughty foods or bad foods. So it's finding that balance, but also digging into that, the language that we're using and what we're telling ourselves about foods. Because if we're labeling foods as good and bad or healthy and unhealthy, the emotions that then come with that are the things that will determine how we eat.
Yeah, and the judgment that you place on yourself for making the
Absolutely.
choice that you make, it like from my perspective, no food is about food. Food is food. We use it, it's fuel for our body, and you know, we make educated choices about what we eat. I know that at times I choose to eat food that is not the best for me. That doesn't mean that it's an unhealthy food. It just, you know, my body's got sensitivities and I can react to certain things, but I enjoy the food. I know the consequence of that choice that I've made. And it's not something that I'm going to punish myself for eating, but equally there's something in that I still choose to eat it. So it's you know, really useful to kind of, for me and my journey with food and eating, and is sort of unpicking the choices that you make and why you make the choices that you make
and why you make them. Exactly. And I think that sounds a lot like eating with awareness, and that's the level up, isn't it, from that kind of unconscious way of eating. So you might have in the past, or people listening to the podcast might have identified with that, I just eat this and I don't think about it and I feel terrible afterwards, but it's like an unconscious behavior, isn't it, that's happening. But the step up from that, or the next step forwards, I suppose, is having that time to find the awareness of what you're doing. So I always feel like there's a gap between doing the behavior, whatever eating behavior that is, and what food it's led you to eat. If you track it back, there is a gap there in which you could make another choice, or at least have the awareness of what you're doing consciously. And with that, you've got the ability to make a change if you want to. So I'm trying to think of an example. So let's say chocolate's a good example, isn't it? So when my kids were little and I had postnatal depression, my go-to stress release was chocolate. So I was eating a lot of chocolate, but I would just do it without thinking. So I would find myself eating the chocolate and eating a lot of chocolate and feeling better, but I hadn't really noticed myself doing it. So if you can, once I'd realized that I was using that as a stress, not a stress response, but as a tool to reduce my stress strategy, then I could kind of unravel the food from the emotion. So I could realize that when I was stressed, so then I could think about what else could I do to reduce that stress, what's causing this stress, and also I could then start to make other choices. So if I don't want to carry on eating this amount of chocolate, is there anything else I could do to feel less stressed, get the results without it being associated with that food? And again, with the balance, for me, that did not involve giving up chocolate. That was just working out how could I eat a healthy amount of chocolate, enjoy the chocolate, and be less stressed. So yeah, it's complex, isn't it? Actually, talking through it's very complex, but essentially eating is a behavior. And most of our behaviors, or probably all of our behaviors, are kind of underpinned with lots of unconscious stuff. So what we believe, what we feel, what we value in our life. And I think sometimes it's about going backwards, isn't it? Tracking that backwards and unraveling the reasons for eating. And if it's not to physically nourish your body, it's going to be emotional. So it's unraveling, isn't it? And then deciding, as you said, you can still decide, I feel stressed, I'm going to eat chocolate, but at least you're aware of what you're doing and why you're doing it.
It's like, I know for me, like, because I've got, you know, the health conditions that I've got, and I have inflammation in my body, so if I eat certain foods, I seem to struggle more with symptoms. I enjoy the foods. Now, I could completely cut them out and restrict myself, or I have to recognize that if I do eat them, it's going to have an impact on what I can do the next day or the next couple of days, and sort of learn to manage that. And that's evolved and may continue to evolve. I am at a stage at the moment where I enjoy those foods, and I understand that there is a consequence to that. So it's like you say, it's a conscious choice, and there's other things that I do to manage my health, and that is part of that stuff. So I think there is something in recognizing that we all have to eat. It's not like we can just not eat. And it's not healthy to just not eat. So it's making, for me, it comes down to making choices and understanding, like, you do have a choice, and if it feels like you don't have a choice, like you say, I'm picking that thing. So someone like me who is consciously making choices to eat food that isn't necessarily nourishing me in its wholeness, what would your suggestions be? Well, is there something, a way in which you would be having a conversation with me, or is there, what would you do? How would you work?
Well, I'd need a bit more detail in terms of the types of foods, because that's one of the key things, isn't it? Actually, when you're talking, you know exactly what food you're talking about, and I have no idea what food you're talking about, but I could guess. But in terms of being well nourished, it feels to me like a bit of like a hub. So you've got your core foods that will nourish you. And if you're able to eat those, let's say 80% of the time, anything that you've labeled as less nourishing or unhealthy, you'd still be able to eat, but the quantity of it and the frequency of it wouldn't be harmful. So the foods so it's kind of having a combination of the foods that are high quality, nutrient dense. So the key, if we grouped foods into categories that have kind of similar qualities or contain a similar range of nutrients, they would be fruit and vegetables as a group. So they have a lot of our vitamins and minerals and fiber in, so they're very nourishing. And there's the protein foods. So those things like nuts, seeds, pulses, eggs, fish, meat, they all are rich in protein, and they also have minerals in, some vitamins. So that, whereas the fruit and vegetables then don't give you a lot of protein, if you only ate fruit and vegetables, you'd be missing the other nutrients. So it's building on that. So it's the vitamins, the minerals and the fibers that the vegetables and the fruit would give you, some protein from those sources, whether it's meat-based or plant-based. Then there's the carbohydrate group is a little bit controversial. There are people who don't want to eat carbs, and there are people that love carbs, and there are people in between. But again, if we look at it from the benefit side, the positives, what is good about carbs, I just think it's more healthy. It's another opportunity to get more fiber into our body. And there's a range of different vitamins in the carbohydrates that you wouldn't find in the fruit and vegetables. So let's say in the carbohydrates, like especially the whole grain, unrefined type of carbs, there's a lot of B vitamins in there. The B vitamins themselves are within the whole grain. So once we've refined things and stripped them and turned them into white stuff, there's not much vitamins left, but those whole grain carbohydrates really quality. And then there's and small amounts of fats and oils that are really helpful for us. So cutting out fat wouldn't be healthy at all. But again, I've got this kind of misconception that it's bad for us. So none of those foods or food groups give us all of those vitamins or minerals. So there isn't one food that you could eat that would give you all your water soluble vitamins, all your B vitamins, all your fiber, all your protein, all your fats. It just doesn't exist. You have to eat a variety from each of those food groups in order to get all the different vitamins and minerals and nutrients that your body needs. So if that is in place in a really healthy balance, then adding on the things that have calories, flavour, enjoyment, but not much in the way of nutrients. So I'm thinking cakes, biscuits, ice cream, you know, they taste good, they're going to give us calories, but there's no vitamins in them, there's no minerals in them, there's no fibre in them, there's not much protein in them. But we still want to include them in our diet, don't we? But if they form like the periphery rather than the main chunk, we can enjoy them in a way that's really healthy, because then not only are we getting all the nutrients we need from the hub of what we're eating, we're already well because we've got the nutrients in, and there's a bit of space for what we would term more enjoyable foods. So in my mind, that's where the balance lies. And where we could go out of balance would be if we weren't eating those main nourishing foods. So let's say somebody was not having any fruit and veg, for example, their hub isn't very well balanced. Then if that's a circle, like a pie chart, what else is taking up that segment where the fruit and veg would have been? Because that's probably where the ice cream and the crisps and the chocolate and the cakes coming in. So then you're having a lot more unhealthy foods with less nourishment forming part of your hub, I suppose. So for me, it's all about that kind of, if you focus first on being well nourished from those food groups and having a bit of all that you need, the unhealthy foods that you choose to eat around that are not going to have a massively detrimental effect. They're just going to be there for those bits of enjoyment, and you can then eat them guilt-free, especially if your body is well nourished enough. They won't be then craving the things like the sugars, so you probably naturally eat less of those things anyway. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes absolute sense. It is that, you know, it's something kind of we've touched on before when we've had conversations, that eating nourishing foods and caring for your body, it is an act of love. So then if you're doing that and you're nourishing yourself with the things that your body needs, then you naturally are going to eat less of the foods that aren't nutritionally dense, because you're not going to want them, are you? You're not going to be hungry for them. You're not going to crave them. I mean, I know I've read stuff before where if you have food cravings, quite often that's it's signifying that your body is trying to get some kind of like vitamin, mineral in, and we identify it as, sometimes we identify it as those fast foods or those like the foods that we enjoy, and it isn't necessarily that. So it is that if you're nourishing your body with the things that it needs, you are free to enjoy a little bit of what you want, but also you're only going to want a little bit of what you want. Is that right?
No, I totally agree. And I think again, when we were talking about taking that step back, what you're doing then is you're approaching food from a totally different angle. So where you come into that is, if you've made that conscious decision, I intend to nourish my body well, you're doing it from a place of self-care. You're deciding that I want to care for this body. I only have one body. I'd like it to last for quite a long time. I choose to treat it well. Anything that you've previously decided is not treating it well, you will naturally then do less of, because your focus is on how can I care for myself and what does that look like.
And I think that's kind of part of my like me personally, when I got my diagnosis of chronic illness, it's exhausting. I didn't really want to cook. I put on a lot of weight with my medication. Part of me was like, if I'm going to put weight on anyway, I'm going to eat everything I want to eat, because what does it matter? And that's shifted slightly in, like, my focus is never about weight loss. It is about having my body be as healthy as it can be to enable me to do the things that I need to do. But the caveat to that for me at this time is there's certain foods that I really enjoy, and I'm not yet prepared to give them up. because I don't believe in restricting anything. So, you know, as I'm hearing you talk, like definitely, like for me, there's still some work to do around that. But I guess we all have that. We all have that kind of, as well as we can eat, there's still maybe places we can tweak and think about, you know, how we are nourishing our body and caring for ourselves, and why we choose not to.
Yeah, I think that's the key, isn't it? That's where you're starting to dig a little bit deeper into questioning, oh, I'm doing this, but why am I doing it? What's this getting me? What, you know, it could be like that feeling of comfort, couldn't it? That I know this isn't healthy food, but I'm going to eat it anyway. But that's really because I'm feeling rubbish and I just want to feel better. And I've learned through my life that eating a massive amount of whatever food it is brings me that feeling.
Yeah.
It's just natural. It's just like, that's what I always do. That's what I've always felt as a result of it. And that's okay until you want to get a different result.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, isn't it? Right. Oh, hang on a minute. I don't want that anymore. I want this instead. I'm going to have to change how I do that process, because otherwise I'm only going to get the results I've always got.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So that's the icky, ouchy bit, isn't it? Where you've got to change something.
Yeah.
But everything about you screaming, no, that's not me. That's not how I do it. I've
I
done
don't want
it this way.
Yeah, but I think
Which is where the mindset comes in, isn't it? And challenging our strategies, how we've always done things, what we believe, and then doing something different. But again, it's like, what is my motivation to do this? What's motivating me to behave in this way? What's motivating me to behave in a different way? Am I trying to get away from feeling rubbish, or am I trying to get towards feeling really healthy?
Yeah.
And I think what you were saying was, you know, a lot more now you're focused on, I want my body to feel well enough for me to do everything that I want to do. Therefore, that's motivating me to think a little bit more carefully about what I'm putting into my body.
Yeah.
And that's changing habits slowly.
Yeah, because when I got my diagnosis, I was really healthy. I was really healthy before I was ill, if that makes sense. So for a healthy person, I wasn't well. So I know that I am quite rebellious, and part of my self-care journey is recognizing when I'm rebelling against what's in my best interest. And you know, it's been a journey over the last 5 or 6 years of kind of recognizing where I am self-sabotaging. And you know, we can do all of this work with clients and give really, really great insight, or you know, help people reach insight, and then maybe not always doing the things that we need to be doing ourselves. So that's definitely where I'm at the moment, is kind of like, actually, so that's where I was, that's where I was, and then did that kind of rebellion, and just ate whatever I wanted because it made no difference. In my mind, it made no difference. But what I've come to discover is it does make a difference. It does. I've really paid attention to what is going on for my body. So I think if people are listening and kind of starting to recognize that, actually, maybe I'm not caring for myself in the best way as I can with the food that I choose to eat. It's not like it has to be like that all the time, and it isn't like you're going to sort of, you know, if someone comes and works with you, that you're going to say, right, you have to cut everything out and you cannot eat anything that you want to eat. It is very much about finding the way that works for you. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's how can I eat everything that I love to eat and still be healthy? It's finding that balance. And a lot of the time that simply comes down to how much and how often you're eating certain foods. Yeah. I was from a personal point of view, and it just kind of connected with me there when you were talking. When we think about self-love and nourishing ourselves from a point of view of a self-love, self-care point of view, I've noticed within myself that I will actively in that rebellious thing you were talking about, there are times when I've noticed I will stop doing activities and behaviours around food and drink that I know are good for me. And I've worked out that it ties in with like a self-punishment thing. So if I'm not feeling good about myself, or my self-talk has been very negative and not supportive. So if I've been kind of, what's the expression I'm looking for? Beating myself up over something. So that there's that self-talk. I will notice after a little while, and it's usually when I track it back, oh, I've stopped drinking as much water as I was drinking. I'm not hydrating myself. Why am I not doing that thing that I know is good for me? And quite often it's because I'm unconsciously punishing myself for something that I feel I've not done right. And I think it's quite important to look at both sides in terms of the self-care, like I'm doing this because I'm caring, but also I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
Why am I stopped caring for myself? What is it that I'm telling myself that stopped that behavior? That's quite interesting as well, isn't it? In terms of where often we think we're doing things when we're eating lots of things like the cakes and the chocolate and the ice creams, we feel like we're comforting ourselves, aren't we? But we're unconsciously kind of sabotaging ourselves. But then there's also this active, like unconsciously punishing myself. So I don't know whether people might resonate with that as well, in terms of actively not doing those self-care activities like eating the healthy foods and drinking enough fluids. What's going on for you? Is it, am I actively withholding care and love for myself? And if so, where's that coming from? You know, what thoughts are going around in my mind? But it's such always a complex, come down to unraveling, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Why are we doing what we're doing?
Yeah.
Or why are we not doing what we know that would be good for us?
Yeah. And in relation to food, it's such a complex relationship, because we have to eat. We can't just choose to not eat ever. We've got all of these different societal messages about how we should be with food. We've got all of these, or with anything, unconscious messages that we've picked up through our family of origin or the people that we're around. And I'm really active on social media at the moment, so I'm noticing that there's a lot of, let me think, what I would class as disordered eating being pushed forward as a norm. Like when I was at school a long time ago, we did home economics, and we learned a little bit about nutrition. Nothing as in depth, obviously, as the training that you've done, but we learned the basics of the food groups and the things like that, and kind of it was very much, you know, everything's fine, eat everything in moderation. And then as I've got older, I'm noticing that there's so much more pressure and stuff around what people eat, how people look because of the food that they eat. I don't really know where I'm going with this, but it's just sort of that kind of like, yeah, it's, I think as me as a young person, yeah, there's so much out there, and it's sort of, you know, how do you pick through all of the noise?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think that's where a lot of people will start to look for help from a nutrition professional, whether that be a dietitian or a nutritionist. There is so much information. I think just naturally there's so much information about everything at the moment, isn't it, available because of social media and the internet. You can access anything at any time, and with that comes every single person's view on how to do something, doesn't it? Eat like this, don't eat carbs, don't eat carbs. You know, there is so much conflicting information out there, purely due to the volume of information that's out there. So when and certainly clients have said this to me in the past, I just don't know where to start because I don't know what to believe. And that's quite a key thing, isn't it? You know, same as you started my love of nutrition started back in home economics, learning about the nutrients, the deficiency disorders. Like, I was just fascinated by the fact that food could make us well, or, you know, take the food away and it make us really poorly. But we are lacking that now, aren't we? We haven't learned that. There isn't home economics. So yeah, in terms of how do we pick through that information, I tend to want to come back to the science of it. So to the hard and fast facts that we would have learned at school. These nutrients are essential for life and well-being. Vitamin A, D, E, K, all the B vitamins, proteins, fats, all the minerals we need. Like, that's fact. Our bodies need those to survive.
Yeah.
If we don't have one or more of those nutrients in enough quantities, we're going to experience some level of imbalance or ill health in our bodies. So for me, it's always starting at that level. Are we eating in a way that encourages all of those nutrients to come into our body for optimal health? Anything that tells you to cut anything out, especially whole food groups, feels dangerous to me when done without the support of a nutrition professional who can assess what might therefore then be lacking.
Yeah.
Often people will restrict their diets purely on the basis of calories. They won't be thinking about the quality of their diet. They'll just be thinking about the quantity of calories that's going in. And then that is often related to, if I eat less calories, then I'll be thin. If I'm thin, then I'll be happy. This is like the basic stuff that people are going through, isn't it?
And thin doesn't equate to healthy.
No, it doesn't. Yeah, and you could be a size 6 with super high cholesterol and at high risk of heart disease, or you could be a size 6 and slim and like look good, but you could be deficient in folic acid, which could then put the health of your unborn baby at risk. You know, we're not as a nation factoring in that, or as a world, are we? We just purely seem to be looking at weight's important. The less I weigh, the happier I'll be. How can I eat less calories? How much food do I need to cut out?
Yeah.
So my advice would be, like, if you're in that situation where you're feeling that, you know, you want to lose weight to be happier, focus on the quality of what you're eating, way over the quantity. And of course, there's going to have to be probably some reduction in calories, plus or minus some increased activity levels. But again, the less you're eating on your journey to weight loss, if that's your goal, the more important the quality is.
Yeah.
It's almost more important to focus on the quality when you're eating less food.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, you know, that's where a nutrition professional can really help, because understanding the very basics of nutrition, the nutrients that we're eating, where we find them, what foods we find them in, what they do in our body, what functions they perform, what happens to our body if we don't have enough of them, is a really good why for me. It's a really good basic motivator. Oh, now I understand why the advice is like. Now I understand why the healthy eating advice is what it is.
Yeah.
That's the first step, isn't it? And then also you can then start to assess other things a little bit more carefully. You can look at the weight loss services that are out there that you might join up to and think, wow, that doesn't seem quite balanced, or that doesn't feel quite right in some way. But yeah, certainly anything that seems to cut out massive food groups, I definitely stay clear of.
Yeah, I would agree. It's you know, I've when I had my youngest child, I went to a weight loss service, and I lost weight very, very quickly because I was hyper focused, and you know, I did lose weight very, very quickly. And then was such an interesting experience, because I didn't necessarily, I knew some stuff about nutrition because I've done some stuff about nutrition. I didn't learn anything about nutrition there. I just learned what I could get away with eating to lose weight in that space. And then because I started to get too skinny, it wasn't kind of picked up in a supportive way. It was and I didn't, it's not that I had an eating disorder or that I was even very low weight, just the way in which I carry weight, I look quite slim in the face, and it was quite interesting that then I got to a target that they'd given me. I was still a good 1.5 stone off of that target, and I was getting almost criticized for the way I looked, even though for me I was doing weights and I was quite lean. It felt really good. So it's quite interesting that, you know, even there's some spaces that you can go that their whole thing is about helping you lose weight, and when you're achieving it, you're still getting criticized because you're not doing it the way they think is right.
Not doing it right.
Yeah. I'd completely forgotten about that experience. I'd completely forgotten that even happened. So
what message is that giving out, isn't it? That's making me think, what message is that sending out? It's almost like a right or wrong thing. This is wrong, so you need to be here, but you've gone too far this way. This is also wrong, you need to be here. It's very judgmental, doesn't it?
I mean, my experience, it was quite interesting, and I think that probably is one of the things that pivoted the way I think about kind of eating and food, and you know, it's part of that kind of journey. Like, I'm very interested in the psychology of food and the psychology of eating and the choices that we make, hence why I reflect on the stuff I make. And I think that's why I find like the way you work so interesting, because whilst you are clinically trained and you've worked in the NHS, you have a much more holistic approach, and it seems it sits so much more alongside my own philosophies about, you know, food is a source of nutrition. It is a way of loving who you are and a way of providing for yourself and nurturing yourself, and it isn't something to be used as punishment towards yourself. I think it's that kind of, it's just so much, isn't it? It's like food is so much about.
There's more to it.
Yeah.
You've got the food level as the scientific kind of basis of the you can put your hands on it stuff, and that's the actual food. But what we do with the food is the interesting bit. How we choose, the factors that influence that choice, how we feel about what we are eating, have eaten. That's it's bringing the two together, isn't it? And in an NHS setting, I certainly worked much more clinically and prescriptively, I suppose, apart from anything else, not enough time in a 15-minute, 20-minute, half an hour consultation with anybody. But it's, and I think probably because of the time, it has to be like, what are you eating? What's your goal? Make these changes, have a sheet, bye-bye. Whereas outside of the NHS, there is more time and space to have those holistic conversations, you know, to explore the reasons a little bit more. And it's only my personal experience, but I'm journeying along that as well, you know, as I'm journeying on my own self-care journey, and how that's changed over time for me, with food just being one part of that. But I think the more something comes into your own awareness of how important that is, it just naturally wants to evolve into what you do and how you work with others, doesn't it? So I could do very prescriptive diets, but because of how I've changed over the time I've been a dietitian, that doesn't fit anymore, and I want to evolve, you know, as I've evolved myself, evolve my offerings as well. And definitely, you know, if I've learnt one thing over that time, telling people what to eat or change their diet does not work. The information is useful, but it never, that person has to want to make that change for themselves. So it's more in the facilitation of that process. So we've said before, haven't we, people might know, I know what I want, I know what I should eat, but I just don't seem to be able to do it. But I think there's levels to it, isn't there? And actually having a good grounding in nutrition is a good basis. So get to that. I know what's healthy, what's less healthy, what amounts are healthy, what amounts are less healthy. Then how do we get there? How do we motivate ourselves there? What's stopping us from getting there currently? And that's all around the mindset, and whether that's a mindset of self-care or not. So bringing that all together. It's exciting.
It is, and it's been quite interesting, like the little kind of revelations I've had just, you know, in this conversation. You're not working with me therapeutically, we've just had a chat, and it's like, oh yeah, I do that, that's interesting, I'm going to reflect on that and spend a bit of time working with that. So thank you. It probably feels like now's a good time to bring it to an end. Does that feel okay for you?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we've had a good chat, haven't we? Time's flown by.
I've loved it. Thank you so much. I will pop your links in the comments in the description, and so if anyone kind of wants to check out the Be Well space, see what you're about, they can do that, and they can get hold of you. And I know you've got particular types of clients that you like to work with, so they'll be able to kind of have a look and see if you're the right person for them, and kind of get a little bit of idea about what you're about. And hopefully people that have listened today, if they're thinking much like I have, oh yeah, actually that connects for me, they feel a little bit more comfortable now to go out and speak to a practitioner and get a little bit of support and kind of cut through the noise. So
absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank
if you want someone to cut through the confusion, then definitely start with a nutrition professional. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.